Council special public meeting and budget work session for September 23rd, 2020. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Robert Carnahan,
Here.
John Foreman,
Present.
Ralph Miller,
Present.
Colleen Scheeben. Present. Richard Sharp,
Here.
Julia Rivera. Here. Randy Niemeyer.
Present.
I am present. Jill Murr. Present. And David Austin is absent.
We have a quorum. Okay, so in accordance with the governor's executive order, everybody stay away from each other, wear masks. The meeting can be viewed at cedarlakein.org/view-town-meeting/. You must join the meeting through the link to participate in public comment. If you have any question or comment about an item on the agenda, please email jill.murr@cedarlakein.org by 4 p.m. Mrs. Murr will ensure that all submissions are shared and submissions entered into the minutes of the meeting. Please keep your comments civil and constructive to the public policy issues. We start with public comment on agenda items. Any public comment? Third call for public comment. Public comment is closed. We have new business. Item number 1, we have paving proposals A, B, C, and 1 extra D. So we have the fire station parking lot, Fairbank Street, the town grounds, and East Lakeshore Drive and Surprise Park. Ms. Murr.
Council, these were mentioned at your last meeting. If I could bring them up and have the special public meeting tonight on these items. The fire station parking lot, if you remember, we used some of our millings from a previous project to fix part of town's parking lot there. This is just that section that's all broken up. It's not the entire lot. That amount is $26,820. The equipment will be going right past the fire department on the paving. That would be funded through CCD funding. Fairbanks, this is the section from 129th heading north up to 125th. And that amount is $83,637. Oh, I'm sorry, backwards. $90,781. If you'll notice on the quote, the proposal there, there's no mobilization because the equipment is already in the area. That would be paid for from a mix fundings from casino to storm to the MBH unrestricted. The town grounds parking lot is in an amount of $83,637.20. I have a legal opinion from David that park impact fees could be used for that. The East Lakeshore Drive is that small part of the Surprise Park area that was never completed. That one is $11,969.50. And again, that would be paid for from a combination of funds from casino to storm to MBH unrestricted. And all of these funds have been confirmed with the clerk treasurer, as well as David and I had a discussion on all of these. These are kind of tagging off the prices of the Houghton Place project.
Thank you. So we have proposals in the amount of $90,781 for Fairbanks, $83,637.20 for the town grounds parking lot, $11,969.50 for East Lakeshore Drive, and $26,820. That was for the fire station parking lot. Is there a motion by the council to approve these items as listed and with the funding sources noted by the town administrator?
So moved.
It's a motion by Mr. Sharp. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Scheeben. Are there questions or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Robert Carnahan,
I'm voting no because we're not doing all of Fairbanks.
John Foreman,
Yes.
Ralph Miller,
Yes.
Colleen Scheven,
Yes.
Richard Sharp,
Yes.
Julie Rivera,
Yes.
Randy Neiman.
Yes, motion carries 6-1. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yep,
It is anticipated we'll have these done this fall.
Very
that's
good.
great. Weather holds.
Work session, we have one item. It is a big one. The year 2021 budget. We have Corby Thompson from Cronin Associates with us via Zoom. There have been numerous meetings for the last several months with the Council Affairs Committee, the clerk treasurer, the town administrator, the fire chief, the police chief, our consultant. So this is kind of a product of that. By no means a final document. All items are still up for consideration and debate, so nobody should think that any proposals here are written in stone. Everybody has an opportunity in a budget work session like this to offer input and ideas, and if we need to get back our noses back to the grindstone, then that's what we'll do. We have a couple of weeks to work on it still. So with that, I would turn this over to our clerk treasurer, Ms. Sandberg.
Thank you, Randy. I will make one disclaimer first, but as you stated, it is a draft. I handed out to you all my budget form ones. This is exactly how it's input into Gateway. You'll notice my personnel services line items that I have in are different from information I received in regards to what has been some ongoing discussions. So for personnel lines, please refer to Mr. Thompson's working papers that he shared with you all.
And to back up Ms. Sandberg's disclaimer, in working in conjunction with the Council Affairs Committee, I have been submitting some information to Cronin Associates on some of the things that the council had prioritized. So there might be slight differences, but as Jennifer said, let's reference the master salaries list for the personnel related items. They were also provided to us a breakdown of allocations of salaries too, which is something that I don't think any of us have ever really kind of laid our eyes on to understand where all of these different salaries of our different people come from. So Jennifer's right on that there will be slight differences. Don't be alarmed. This is all part of the work session process. So Jennifer had a set of proposals. I presented a set of proposals. Now this is where we make the sausage.
I don't have any of those copies.
Run down here and grab it, Bob. I'll bring it outside.
Let me see if I can forward you an email, Bob.
All I have is Jennifer's budget form 1.
Okay. Give me 1 second here. I'll see if I can find my email.
In the meantime, I don't know exactly where you all want to begin, but I will say that when it comes to the supply line items, that's your 200 series, your services line items, that's your 300 series, your capital outlay, which is 400. All of those estimates that I put into the Form 1s were based upon all our historical data in the system.
Sent to you, Bob.
I looked at.
All right, I'm going to go to my computer room and print it.
Yep,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
I looked at what each department, each fund had spent over the last 3 years. I looked at 2017, 2018, 2019, and I also looked at 2020, even though we know 2020 is an odd year because of COVID. It really throws some of the line items out of whack, but I think it was important to also use that because with the growth of the town, I think that helps kind of balance, where, and your supply line items, I mean, office supplies, miscellaneous supplies, I mean, that varies year to year depending on what the departments are doing. I sat down with department heads and we looked at what their anticipated needs are when it comes to some equipment. Another item I would like to point out is in talking with Chief Wilkening, I would like to make an update to some of his repair and maintenance line items. I'd like to add a little bit more in anticipation of vehicle repairs. I think we should bump that up to 45,000, and maintenance agreements, I think, should be bumped up to 6,000 to anticipate some annual recurring costs.
What page is that on, Jen?
That's page 5.
Page 5?
So currently, what I had in there was 35,000 for vehicle repairs. But I'd like to bump it to 45. And like I said, right below it is maintenance agreements, and I'd like to bump that to 6. I also think the council should consider, and Chief Wilkening can certainly speak more to this, but I think the idea to add number 13 as a full-time, an additional full-time firefighter, EMT, possibly paramedic. I'd say we budget at the max because paramedic is paid more than EMT, because he has, in order to meet the needs of his department, he's run with that 4th man on his schedule. We've never actually had that 4th man budgeted in. So that is continually
So it's all overtime.
eating
and-
up part-time and
Yeah,
overtime.
that would, yeah, okay.
And so I have some play numbers. It really varies. It'll obviously up the full-time line item. Depending on which way we go to allow him, whether it's firefighter EMT, firefighter paramedic, it'll play with perf and FICA med. But I think it would help bring down that overuse of the overtime line item. And I think it would also help save him some of his part-time, because as he's discussed in the past, he has trouble getting those part-timers to fill in, and especially as he has guys who have been with him longer, and there's people taking vacation, there's other things coming up. As he's talked about in the past, there's more events in town where staff is needed. I think it's possibly time, because as we all know, next month I'll be bringing to you all an additional appropriation for the general fund, because we need to request that from the DLGF in order to meet payroll obligations within the fire department.
So a question on that, and Todd and Jen, for both of you. Right now, in the proposed draft from Jen is part-time officers 95 and overtime of 75. Would a 13th officer reduce that sufficiently enough to?
That is already reduced.
I-
Okay, so what I'm getting at here is where we're at this year, okay? What's going to be that final number this year compared to what that draft proposal is? Will that pay for most of that 13th?
I think we can bring down that part-time line item some, and well, I don't want to mess with overtime, because earlier this year, you all approved for part-timers to receive the holiday pay. We added that holiday schedule for the fire department, and we never had that budgeted in. So that's also a portion of what's been eating up the overtime this year. So I'd rather leave the overtime as it is.
Because if I'm not mistaken, this year in overtime, we're well over that 75, right? We're already over
We've-
100, right?
We've made,
But what I'm getting at is just looking at raw numbers, is if we're already way the heck over 100,000, it would make a heck of a lot of sense to add that 13th guy if we could bring the part-time down a little bit and the overtime down to 75 and find a way to live within that. It does make a lot of financial sense. So that's just the questions I have trying to clarify it.
I mean, we had some unexpected things happen this year because of.
Absolutely,
obviously the
yeah.
COVID thing, plus, a few people going down and it just sucked up the overtime. And like Jen said, and she could, I really didn't even need to speak. She hit it on the head. The idea is that we have, the part-time people are few and far between, but they also help us supplement our staff, obviously. And so we want to run one shift, at least one shift of some part-time people, so that when we have vacations and stuff, we're not making.
You've got 'em in the loop.
overtimers
Yeah.
Work that overtime to cover. And that's what we try to do with that, but we have so much of it this year that couldn't even cover the part-timers. We had to cover the full-time stuff.
So Jen, if I could step back to the additional appropriation.
Mhm.
We have obviously money from the sale of that property, the old JoJo's, which was some extra cash that we weren't expecting. Was that taken into the general fund?
That was taken into the general fund, but what I want to do with the additional appropriation is I want to do an appropriation reduction at the same time that I do an additional appropriation. That way
Okay.
that's why it's like a net zero.
And have we collected any money yet from the Lennar development? Remember, it's $1,000 per lot?
Yes.
Yeah,
Currently,
we've got some of that.
that
right, Jen?
fund sits at,
75.
is it at 75? I knew it was
Nice.
up there.
I was looking
Okay,
at
that's
something
great.
else.
They're up to
The
75
numbers
houses already?
So
Well, 75,000.
How the hell
75,000,
are they
Jen?
doing it?
Crazy.
Jesus.
Have you driven by there,
I'm
John?
sorry,
Yeah,
I
a
can't
few weeks
remember what
ago.
fund number
Insane.
I
On my
gave.
motorcycle, drove in it, took a
75,000
ride.
Insane.
How much
Yes.
is in there?
Yes,
75.
75,000 exactly.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around, a little bit of the cash flexibility that we might have, going into next year. Obviously, 2022 is the year that everybody has question marks with the income tax collections and all that stuff, but next year looks okay for us.
I've got a comment there too, Randy.
What's that, Corby?
As far as monies, revenues being recognized that maybe have not been recognized before. I've been in talks with Sue about updating the payment in lieu of taxes. She believes that there is plenty of funding a bit available in cash flow among all of the utilities to kind of basically update those amounts that the town is receiving from these utilities. And it's a pretty good chunk. In 2021, we're thinking that the general fund is going to be received from the utilities about $250,000 from payment in lieu of taxes, whereas prior years, Jill, you might have a better idea on this, but between 50 and 100,000 has kind of been historically how much has been received in the general fund. So I don't want to say that those funds should be used for that and that only, but there are going to be some revenues recognized next year, including that excess levy appeal.
You
Not been recognized before.
You wouldn't advise us to spend recklessly and have a good time?
I would not advise that. However, it seems to me that it's very important to you guys and the council as a whole that your public safety needs get met. So I was just kind of throwing out there are some additional revenues coming in.
Closing that gap and making sure that we can retain the talent and also recruit talent to us instead of being the area that people go to recruit. So
Hey, Corby, right?
Yes.
Hi, I'm John Foreman. I don't think we've met yet.
Nice to meet you, John.
Likewise. Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
Have you ever worked with cities and towns that have had, the exponential growth that we're experiencing and utilized any funds from a sale of property or some of these extra dollars that perhaps have come up for bonuses for any public safety employees? And or would it be frowned upon by, because I come from the private sector, so we live our life on commissions and bonuses, and that's how you keep and retain talent. And we've lost like 20 some people just in the paramedic fire department area, not to mention a few police officers over the last couple of years. So we're surrounded by some pretty decent little towns around us. So what kind of cleverness could we do in that regard in the next year's budget and or yet this year, in your opinion?
As far as the sale of property and the proceeds for that, I've not experienced that. I know there are people in my office that have, so I can kind of ask them about that. But another thing that I've been talking with Sue, trying to figure out a way to get more monies available for these public safety employees is, I mentioned, we're going to up the payment in lieu of tax to $250,000 a year going forward. So that will be, generating at least another $100,000. The excess levy appeal about $40,000. And then we're going to have, or there is a potential to collect prior payment in lieu of taxes that the utilities have not paid.
I see.
So in determining maybe if, you know, we want to kind of make up, if that's what you're getting at with these bonuses, some of this, these lost wages or felt lost wages, you can use these, you know, additional, this catch-up payments in lieu of taxes to pay bonuses or something like that.
Corby, I think one of the things that maybe John's getting at is to do something yet this year.
Right, and that's what you can collect payment in lieu of taxes from the utilities this year for prior years to get them some kind of bonus this year.
But
Okay.
wouldn't we be stealing a little bit from a cash balance for next year that we're using to provide pretty substantial raises?
Not if it comes from the utilities, because we don't have anything budgeted for the utilities. Yeah,
That's why I was just checking. I didn't want to
Yeah.
offset anything for 2021 by doing something this year.
right. No, that would not.
I see.
So those are kind of some thoughts that I had as far as getting something out for payment this year. It'd be some kind of, you know, catch up payment in lieu of tax from these utilities. 'Cause
I see.
I believe Sue had mentioned that they had not been paying what either a resolution or ordinance had been signed that said they should be paying. So
Gotcha. And I did have one more question related to that. What is typically holding back the State Board of Accounts from approving a budget that is higher in any certain areas from year to year if you have a financial means to pay it?
yeah, it's actually the DLGF that reviews. the budget.
Yeah, DLGF, I'm sorry.
Yeah, basically the DLGF, if you have the money to spend your budget, they let you adopt that budget,
I
even
see.
if it drops you to $0.
I see.
Obviously, that's not good practice, so we're not gonna advocate anything like that. But really, that's all the DLGF looks at. If you have the money for the budget, they will allow you to spend it.
I see.
Mhm.
So it's not unheard of to have a decent jump then in any one particular department if the needs demand it.
Yeah, you know, it's not atypical to see, you know, certain departments on a year-to-year basis jump up, jump down, same with funds. You know, if there's a major capital expense, you might have a fund go from $20 million to $0 in a year. And in doing so, their budget might have gone from $0 to $20 million.
Gotcha.
So,
And one of the reasons I mentioned that Lennar and the cash sale of the property was also looking at 2022
Right.
and the possibility of some major shortfalls in the income tax funds, which would be our
That's-
local option income, which is partially funds public safety.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, it's going to take a hit. There's no doubt.
So we don't know what that's going to be. So it'd be good for us to find ways to set a little bit aside
Yeah,
to make up for a
Rainy day.
shortfall in 2022, because maybe 2023 that comes back, but 2022, we could be searching for money and we don't want to have to claw back things that we're doing this year to make progress.
understood.
Just a reminder with that local option income tax money that goes directly to public safety. The last couple of years, we've been using it to pay for the PSAP costs. No
And-
personnel has been paid out.
And
of it.
when will that makeup be rolling off of that though, Jim?
Next year is the final year for the back bill.
Right, so that'll be perfect timing for that.
So that'll be a little over, just under 9,000 that we won't have to worry about going into the future.
9,000 or 90,000?
9,000 per month.
No,
Sorry.
okay.
Per month,
So,
okay,
9 per month.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I'm
Okay.
seeing the invoice in my head.
Yeah,
So a little over 100,000 a year that we're using right now on catching up on the PSAP stuff that we did. So even if there's a reduction in Lowit, that may cancel itself out, but if we have a little extra cash balance that we can play with in
Right.
2022, we might be able to just continue our trek forward that we're
Mhm.
making here in public safety. So, okay. Continue.
I mean, where would we all like to go next? Corby, did you want to?
yeah, I mean, I can just kind of add to what you said. You know, we've had meetings prior where we've kind of already discussed a little bit of those supplies, those other services and charges, those capital items. But what's really changed since our last meeting with the Council Affairs Committee is really the salaries and wages. So, I mean, we can just go ahead and hit that, or if there are other questions on some of the other major budget categories, I'd be happy to, anybody has questions there, you can ask.
Yeah, maybe
Jen.
before we
She's-
dive into that, Corby, I did have a question. I perused this briefly tonight. Did we have any money in here, Jill and or Corby and or Jen, for Lake? Any of the seeded money from the past going into the Eco Restoration Fund, or do we have any money anywhere for this Eco Restoration Fund, the non-reverting?
So I had thought of that the other day and told Jim that maybe we should budget something every year, but we needed your approval to do that. The way the resolution was written, you're supposed to look at the funds every year and
Right.
determine an amount.
Right.
The amount we initially did was 15,000. If we had 15,000 and seed it this year to make that transfer, and then should we budget that? Do you want to set an amount of, at a minimum of 15,000 each year to put in there?
Well, we could, but we all know that 15,000 a year is not gonna move the needle. So
Exactly. And did you want that item looked at? So with the work session tonight, that was an item that we
Okay.
hadn't discussed as a council affairs committee.
Yeah,
But
I
to
think we
have the
should
whole
because
group-
we had Sue do a ton of analysis of what we could or couldn't do when we
most
were
of it
trying
was
to come up with
stormwater
22
related.
million, and a lot of it was storm related. So I just feel like growing that fund is important.
Which the seeded money is again, local option income
Yeah,
tax
and half
money.
of it's used bonding for roads, I believe.
Well, we've
Yes,
got
we
some
have the
debt service tied
2015.
to it, right?
The 2015 road bond is
Yeah,
tied
the
to
road
CEDA.
bond, about
How-
50% of it.
How much of, what in percentage of that seeded fund is tied into that debt service?
I thought it was 50.
A
but
little over half,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
our,
it might be.
The thing we gotta watch with seeded
It's
though
gonna go
is-
down.
is the fluctuating.
Yeah.
our
So
annual,
the stormwater, being Cedar Lake is a stormwater basin,
Right.
is a more
Legitimate.
sustainable.
Yeah, I knew Sue had
Yeah.
always mentioned that as well, but I just felt like, hey, we always said we didn't join in with the South Shore train because we needed that seeded money to help with the lake
Oh, that's
and our
legit,
other
John.
issues.
It's
So I
legit.
just kind of want to figure out how we can get something. I'm good with a small amount like the 15K. I just don't want to ignore it. Even if we can make a donation from this year, I think it's important.
That's what I was gonna ask, is do you want us to look at the funds from this year, see what is available for transfer?
Yeah.
And bring it back to you at your next meeting or two,
Sure.
in October, and authorize that transfer. We can do it, the resolution that you adopted several years ago allowed to bring back different percentages of what could be transferred.
If you could, that'd be great.
We can bring that number back to you, but if you wanted
Something's
to make
better than
a commitment of 15,000, we can look at that dollar amount for every year and make sure it wouldn't negatively impact.
At a
the
No
minimum.
less than,
At a
maybe,
minimum,
would be
yeah,
a
that's
safe
fair.
number,
Yeah.
just so we
I
at
think
least are
that's-
putting something towards the goal line.
Yeah, if
Moving the
we-
ball a little bit. It's
We
not
can have
much.
a little cash pot even
And then
to
as
throw in as a down payment on something to get the ball rolling. you
Right.
know? Yeah,
to-
makes sense.
to
Or
segue
marketing
into
dollars.
that, even though
Something.
storm's a utility, we can also look at the stormwater as Sue does the annual analysis on that in the review of it.
Mhm.
Have her look at that, and perhaps there could be an annual transfer into the lake project from that as well, since that way it shows the continued commitment to the project.
Sure. I think something like that would be good because once we have a plan, we can go fundraise and we may need dollars in order to use for marketing purposes
And we can also attract partners
and partners.
with the development that is going on and proposed to go on. There's opportunities for partnership there
Takes
too.
money to make money.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, having a foundational amount of money would be really good to
Yeah.
start.
I would say that the stormwater review will be after your rate case.
Okay,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That makes
yeah.
total sense. Okay, if everybody's good with that, then.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
yeah, we
Good.
put together that transfer
We'll look
resolution.
At 15 and then option out of whatever the cash balance is.
Thanks,
So
Sue.
is there any other items before we dive into the salaries? Okay, Corby and Jen, let's move forward.
So part of what you guys have in front of you is kind of this master salaries and wages schedule I've put together. It should have every town employee and their allocation of their salary and wages among the different funds. Plus, you can kind of see a comparison of their 2020 wage to the 2021 wage. And this is something that I put together. Randy had made it seem like it's something that the council had not really seen before. And really to see what you're approving in this budget does affect the utilities to some extent. So I think it is good to kind of have all this stuff pulled together. And, you know, if we don't have any questions, I can kind of just start going through maybe some major changes that have happened since we last spoke and since last year.
Can I make one, I don't know if I saw it in here or not. Yeah, it actually is in here. One of the comments that I made to Corby that I thought we needed to do from an organizational standpoint is we're going to have a police chief, fire chief, a public works director, director of operations, you know, and a planning director. Those are going to be our 4 main department heads.
Right.
And we want them all to be at the same salary, which is 72,100 for next year. There would have been a slight difference with the public works director of operations and planning director. They would have been a little bit lower, but as a way to try and tighten up our organization, that I made that proposal to Corby, and it's a very slight adjustment of about $1,000 or so as a way to get everybody on an equal level when it comes to our department heads. And then obviously the big one is the town manager line item, which is something the council is going to have on their October 6th agenda, is a contract with a town manager.
Where's that line item? Under,
That will be in the town council and administration.
oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So,
I just seen.
yeah, it's early in the thing, John.
You can see 2021
Yeah.
was what we discussed with
I got it.
Mr. Everly.
So yeah, that would be the one, you know, new position that's really been added that was not there before. And it, as you can see, it is a substantial position. You want me to go through some other changes, Randy, or?
You can. Yeah, I see. Thanks.
We were talking about making those salaries. Okay. I'm sorry, Corby, I had a little sidebar going here.
That's right. I mean, I've got a whole list of kind of what's changed. If you want me to just kind of go through it and then maybe we can just discuss afterwards. I don't know if that'll be easy or not, but.
Yeah, that would be fine. I just want to say something before you get started on that on the town manager. So part of what we did as a council in putting together this package for the town manager was looking at what we had budgeted last year for a planning director, which was 85, and we never used it. What was requested and required to hire the town manager of the caliber of a person we hired, which was slightly more than that. So it wasn't really that big of a leap to do that organizational change and then to look at possibly, if Jill accepts, having Jill as our planning director, which would keep her on the same salary queue as she has been on. So there would be nothing lost there on her move into a department head position. So that was kind of the big picture discussion that took place for transparency's sake. And like I said, at the October 6th council meeting, Rick Eberly and his wife will be here as we consider the contract that Mr. Austin is working on right now. And I should have a draft, hopefully sometime this week or early next week, to review and then circulate and make sure everybody checks off on it and that it meets the provisions of our personnel policy handbook as well. So go ahead, Corby. Thank you.
Sure. So kind of other I'm gonna call them organizational changes, just meaning kind of maybe a position change from one department to another. One of those would be the event coordinator Previously, that amount had been allocated to the Parks Non-Reverting Fund. However, there's very limited funding in there. So we've moved that to the Council and Administrative Department. That's an unfilled position right now, I believe. But that is something that we did change. There were also previously 3 employees out of Public Works that had a portion of their salary paid out of the Lake County Solid Waste Fund. Those amounts have since been reallocated and they've been kind of just shuffled into MVH, the general fund, and the 3 utilities. It was about $42,000, so really split among those different funds. It's a minimal impact there. I added a full-time building and code enforcement officer. Randy, I think this was something that you wanted to see, you know, kind of a specialist in there. And if not, correct me, because I was under the impression that was the case.
Right, so
Jill.
the organizational part of this was moving code enforcement over to building because there's so much that can be done within the building department and spreading out the allocation of that into some utilities with that if we can get a person in code enforcement that also can do building inspections, because our need in that is so great right now. Having somebody to be able to do both jobs would be really helpful to the whole picture of getting up to speed on everything, being able to enforce codes that aren't just ordinance violations related to weeds and nuisance and other things, but also code violations having to do with building codes. So that was what the council's discussed actually for a couple of years.
Yep.
And this year you can see it actually in our budget and within our organizational structures to get someone to do ordinance and code and violations and do some supplemental building inspections as well.
Well, does that mean that you're gonna send Jamie to training or she's out of a job?
I don't know if that means either of those right now, Bill, because this hasn't been adopted. That's something that we would have to discuss.
What was the discussion on before?
The discussion was
About
just
2 years.
in general on how to get more out of that position. So it's not just an ordinance related thing, but it's actually a building code related thing because it does say code enforcement. So we're looking at building code, we're looking at building inspections. So if that's the direction of the council is to send the person we have to training, then that's the direction. If not, then it will be an opportunity for people to apply because it would be kind of a new position with a new job description.
But it's still part-time in the same line item as Jamie's. What you're referring to? Inspector.
The position that I've added is a full-time position. It doesn't have to be that way. That's just the way I've added it, and it was the way I
It's inspector.
was understanding.
It does say part-time there.
It does say.
Yeah, there's an,
Well, there should be.
and then there's a full-time on-call building inspector.
Right.
We have, yeah, so I have,
That's a good,
do we want to remove one of those positions or do we want to have a
Council
full-time and a part-time?
inspectors.
yeah, we currently have 2 on-call inspectors and
Okay,
this third person would be a full-time person that would do ordinance violations, code violations, and some building inspections during the day, some supplemental stuff.
so I'll leave that then.
Okay. This would also help us in unsafe building as well, to be able to get on top of this thing again, because we've gotten a little bit behind.
So so I know, I'm sure most of you guys know you're going through a water rate case. And in doing so, Sue had submitted allocations of certain salaries and wages to the water utility. And in doing so, those amounts are now increased allocations compared to prior years.
Yes.
What it may have appeared to me was that, you know, the water utility was running low on funds. So there was, I think what probably happened was some of those salaries and wages got pushed over to the wastewater and or general fund. So what I've done is I've used the allocations that Sue provided the IURC with kind of as a basis and reallocating some of these salaries and wages. Essentially, if
What
they,
he's saying
Mhm.
is that as part of our rate case in front of the IURC, Sue created new allocations on the water utility
To
as
be
part of,
sustainable.
right, as part of the funding request.
Right.
So what Corby did was work with Sue to make sure they matched up.
Fair enough. Makes sense.
yeah, and in doing so, because previously less had been allocated to the water utility, the water utility is kind of taking on more salary than it previously was. And so what I've done is reduced the wastewater allocations for clerk treasurer salaries and wages in the clerk treasurer's department, the administrative department, including the council, and then any clerks. I essentially made it a little bit more level. The wastewater still taking on more than the water utility, as is pretty standard.
Well, we have more wastewater customers too.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yeah, and I think if you look at the allocations, it's almost a double share in most of those allocations. And again, we can, we can reallocate these however we'd like, but this is just kind of a kickoff point. The public works employees, I reduced their general fund and MVH allocations as opposed to the wastewater. That to me just made more sense considering there's the funding's a little tighter in MVH than it is elsewhere. And as I said, wastewater utility was receiving relief already from those administrative employees versus public works employees. So that's kind of the biggest overhaul, I think, if you're looking at the salaries and wages, master schedule as a whole and trying to compare it to what it was last year. What I could probably do is put together some kind of allocation that was budgeted last year to give some kind of comparison. I'm not sure how useful that would be, but if that's something you guys would like to see, I could do that. But yeah, essentially the reallocations is the water utility is able to take on more, giving a little bit of relief to the general fund, the MVH fund, and the wastewater fund.
This is a great spreadsheet. I mean, this is the
is
first time we've
great.
had something like this. It really gives
look
us an
at, yeah.
opportunity to understand how all of this kind of fits together in the puzzle, And,
That's
and
great. Yeah.
when we're considering a budget, which, the general fund budget is in front of the DLGF, these utilities aren't, but I think it's important for us to
Understood.
know the impact. This is really good work.
I'm blown away by how many employees we have within this
I know.
organization.
Yeah.
I just counted approximately 100. What did I come
I
up?
think there's 151 people in here. Some of these positions aren't filled, but
Boards and commissions.
Yeah,
As
okay,
well in
okay.
front of
So
you.
not full-time
But
employees.
they're still
Yeah.
part of the organization.
They are.
Yeah, they
It's
are.
a it's a crazy number.
Yeah.
It's an
it is.
incredible amount of
sitting
people.
there I just counted them all, wrote like approximately 160, so.
Yeah.
So I think something, Corby, do you have more to add to what you were talking about?
I was just going to kind of mention on the increases from 2020 to 2021.
Okay.
Basically, all non-public safety employees are getting a 3% raise, or at least that's what's being proposed. Fire employees, other than the chief and the deputy chief, are receiving 10% raise, 10% increases. And then I have all police personnel, other than the police chief, deputy chief, and commander receiving 5% raises, with those other three receiving 3% raises.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that.
Yes.
Currently, our deputy chief and our commander positions are hourly positions. They're not salary exempt, correct?
Correct, not salary.
So in order for us to do that and make those leadership positions work like that, which would be good from an organizational standpoint to have your chief, your deputy chief, and your commander on salary, we would have to change the salary ordinance and make those,
They would
sal-
have to change their SOPs.
right, okay. Yeah, because one of the things I think that we want to avoid is something that we've had in our department before where you have officers that are making more than your leadership, sometimes by a large amount if they get a lot of overtime.
Yeah, but they're like the patrol commanders filled in a bunch of positions during the summertime, which is gonna make them make more than and I can't work overtime, or I can, I just don't get paid for it, so. He would resign his position, I guarantee it. Because if you're asking him to work his normal shift and then work another 8 hours because the supervisor called off, or the
Well, we're
supervisor's
not
on
asking
vacation,
him to work another shift. That would be you.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's not, we can't do that, there's no way.
Yeah, so the town council's not asking anybody to work any other shifts. So it's
That's the
just,
situation I have with my deputy. He works more than 40 hours a week and doesn't get paid overtime.
mhm.
Not my deputy chief works 40 hours a week, even if he works over, he never puts in for overtime, he just puts in his 40 hours.
So would
I've
you
even had
say,
to force him, so I'm like, dude, you work another 8 hours on this,
so would
call.
you say it would be fair to make you and the deputy chief salary exempt and then the commander leave him on an hourly?
I don't, because my deputy chief is my investigator, and he is on a call that's gonna be very extensive. It could be a lot of hours in 1 week.
Mhm. But you said that he pretty well works 40 hours a week.
He doesn't put in, he works more than 40 hours. Way more, but he just doesn't put in for it because he's dedicated. But I don't want to take that away from him if he gets put in a position where he's investigating a case that's going to take a long time.
Okay,
Yeah, and also I had a question. I mean, Chief Bill and Chief Wilkening, or Chief Fisher and Chief Wilkening, to be consistent. You guys have lost employees.
Yeah.
I guess, and maybe I'll start with Todd. Is this 10% bump due to the fact that last year we had a little amount? Is that enough to retain? I mean, you're basically averaging around 54,000 now for most of your full-time paramedics, firefighters. And they're all still eligible for overtime, is that correct? So do we as a council think that bump up to that puts us in the middle of the pack or,
Oh, no, it doesn't even get us
Yeah,
close
it's
to
the middle, yeah.
is that right?
It gets us
Trying to
the
get
top.
to the middle.
The number we talked about was $10,000 increases, and that's about a $4,500 to $5,000 increase.
right, but to go to $10,000 increases, you're gonna start cutting
Yeah,
people.
and that's a big bump. So that's where I was trying to get some little throw them a bonus this year in lieu of a raise, just even if it's $1,000 for those major one, what is it? 9 guys, it looks like to me, that make 53,9, 53,5. If there's a way that we can grab that 10,000 or 15,000 and throw them a bump
I thought that.
in good faith, and I don't want to lose them next year. They're going to catch wind of this. Now, money does not always keep good employees. You can give a rotten apple a raise, and it's only good for about a month.
Well,
So,
Another thing is the pension salary comparison that we did.
yeah,
We bumped that up as well, that you guys all have, that we did an extensive analysis on to get that up as well. 'Cause
That was-
currently we're at 47,000. We should be around 60.
That was that one special position, like the
Yeah,
police have the one special position?
established for a 30-year retired member that they would max out on at their percent. Once they retire.
I don't remember where that went. That was a while ago that we saw that. Because you'll have to refresh my memory. I lost that one in my brain there.
Well, yeah. Well, exactly. I brought it with me. We had the PowerPoint presentation, remember, and then also the breakdown and the letter that went with it and the documentation with it. So increasing that and increasing, you know, the 10%, you know, I totally understand it. There's other things that we gotta do in this town, but, you know, the council did make a commitment to public safety.
And it's a pretty significant one that's been a pretty good step. I mean, if you look at police and fire over the last 2 years, between both departments in the raise that Bill was able to do mid-year this year, the raises proposed, what's that?
I said that was in lieu of an offer.
Yeah, but they still got.
I understand, he still got a raise. So the raise he was able to do in mid-year this year, plus the 5% proposal, plus the 2% last year, is about 12%, which would be the same for your department. So there's parity in the increase. Now, maybe it's not enough for anybody, but I don't know how we squeeze more out of that without starting to cut people.
Well, is there any way to consider this to be done in a 2-year period to where it would be considered next year, you know, the 2022? I understand that that's kind of a budget that's.
I was gonna say, can you predict our revenues?
I know, but I mean. I'm
I
sitting
can't
here
after
looking at-
November 6th.
November 3rd. you
Or
think.
third, rather, yeah.
But you're probably looking at more like January before that presidential election settled.
Yeah, that's.
I know what you're saying, Todd. And I think that looking at the commitment that was made this year is definitely shows a priority. It shows a good step. It might not bring you up to the middle of the pack, but hopefully it's something that works to bridge the gap just a touch, take a step in the right direction. I'd like to see that proposal again on the pension, so we could plug that in and get that to Corby and see how that affects things as well.
I'll just give you the copy I have tonight and I'll send you
And Jill, could we get that scanned and sent to Corby as well, so he could plug that in? Because I think that's a reasonable proposal, Todd.
Yeah.
And
that's more of a contribution by the actual employee, but it takes a action of the council.
You set that rate in your salary ordinance every year. So for the first class special in police and in fire, Jen has the salary ordinance right in front of her there.
I have the old one, so I'm sorry, I don't have the current biweekly.
When we did the raise in the police department, though, the $3,000 increase, you did approve the amount increasing.
Yeah, we
Refresh my memory. How-
Anytime there's a raise in the firefighters, it should automatically raise that. salary as
So-
well.
I
Yeah, but
just
when we
want
did that, the fire
confirmation from
department
you
wasn't
all that
on,
that's
right?
how we're doing it for next year. Whatever the raise is for fire, that'll be for the fire special class. And then whatever the raise is for PD, that will be
Todd?
for the PED special class. I want
Yeah.
to make sure we get those
I'm
numbers.
spacing
So
out.
that's updated.
We're spacing out.
Yeah, when you start to collect your pension,
Yeah,
who pays you the pension?
state of Indiana.
Okay.
Public Employees
Same-
Retirement Fund.
It's the same pension. We have the same pension. So as a matter of fact, we're actually working right now to merge our 2 pension boards to have 1 pension board for the township.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so once an officer or a firefighter
Right.
starts collecting a pension, it
Comes
is
from
not
the-
coming out of
The town now.
the town budget.
No, because we're paying the contributions now every paycheck.
Okay.
So, but when we increase that special first-class patrolman salary to have that increased retirement, it also increased how much came out of our check per pay.
The employee really sees the hit.
Yeah.
But it's our pension.
And the reason behind that was because at 52 years old and 20 years of service, we were only gonna make 50% of a first-class patrolman salary. So I would, legitimately be retiring at $32,000 a year. So that's why that's why we increase it. So anytime that the first-class patrolman gets a bump, so should that salary get a bump. The same exact thing. And it should be the same with the fire department. Anytime what's your first class? Your paramedics? Paramedic firefighters?
It's considered first-class fire.
So anytime their first-class firefighters get a bump, so should that salary, to make sure that keeps moving up also. Because it's irrelevant to y'all as far as the amount of money, because it's what we get from a pension standpoint.
No, I just wanted to make sure that the council all knew
Yeah.
that it was the state and it wasn't the
Yeah,
town.
it's not. in the town budget.
No,
So
they
what-
got rid of that.
What I'm seeing in this, Todd, is, I don't really see a proposal of this special rate for this special job description. I see averages like the median pension salary of 63,220. Is that what the proposal is to
Yeah.
make that special?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
I'm going to hand this back over to Jill, and if she could scan this and get this to Corby so he could review and we could see how we can implement that. I think that's a reasonable proposal
Yeah.
for a retirement
Very
benefit.
much so, yeah.
Definitely. And Corby, also with going off the comments of the police chief, let's plug back in the deputy chief and commander in an hourly with that 5% bump and make that little adjustment there. And right now, I have some confusion, Todd, over Nick, because this year we gave him a substantial increase in the middle of the year.
Is that your car? Where are your keys
Okay,
at,
what's your
Ralph?
figure again?
We were distracted by a horn beeping. That's like, you know,
Right outside right here. It's right there.
yeah, it's
That's like-
the ball of yarn going in front of the cat.
Who's
Lost
parked
my
in
train of
front right
thought.
there?
Ralph must have something in his van. He's worried about someone stealing.
So going back to that, was anything done with Nick as far as his classification? I know he went from, what was his previous title?
He was
Assistant chief, now
now
he's deputy
Deputy
chief. And is he a salary exempt now?
Yes.
I just got an update, my chief deputy is watching. She wanted to clarify that currently all department heads are salaried exempt. Fire and police are salaried non-exempt, and they are eligible for the overtime.
So the deputy chiefs in both police and fire are salary non-exempt.
No.
No, they're salary exempt.
Salary exempt.
That's not what Jen just said.
Salaried.
No, we're eligible for a salary non-exempt. The deputy chief are.
Eligible for it, but right now, what is the current classification?
The
I'm confused.
classification of Nick was supposed to be salaried exempt. And that was something we had discussed in the council affairs committee before we made any changes to that position. But however, the deputy chief in the police department is not a salaried exempt position.
Got
It's a salaried
Okay.
position, but non-exempt.
I will have Margot, we will double check tomorrow and
Yeah.
see what's
Right in
going
the
on.
ordinance.
Yeah, if we
Yeah,
could
it's in
get,
the ordinance.
if we
that
could
way.
get some clarification on that, so we make sure we've got people classified the right way first,
Yeah,
that would be
I
helpful.
would just like to see it, I mean, if we're gonna do it for the police department, I'd like to see my deputy have the same option, because he does do a lot of investigative work too, so. It spends a lot of time, he's an our head training officer as well.
Chief Fisher, I have a quick question. So for this open 8 position, the part-time clerk, is that the clerk that you want on just on Saturdays?
So I know that I have some changes coming next year. I have potentially 3 retirees leaving next year. Both my front office clerk and my chief secretary, most likely. At least she's expressed that to me, as well as Lieutenant Purcell. I want to take the front office clerk position and remove it as a full-time position and make it a part-time position. Fill it with part-timers, save on all that overhead that we would have to, and just pay them an hour salary to be at the front window for gun permits, case reports, so that they can pick up case reports or crash reports. If someone comes in Monday through Friday, same stuff that's going on. And then Saturday as well, because we have to have someone there for gun permits on Saturday for our citizens that don't, that work during the week. So,
So have you hired someone?
no, we're in the process. I wanted to, we put it in there because Jen and I had a conversation of when they retire, this is what I'd like to see. So we needed to increase that part-time person so we can get them trained and up and running so that when they retire, they're ready to go.
I know a lot of people that I work with that say every year they're gonna retire, that are around that age and they don't. And,
Well,
So I
Lieutenant
don't
Purcell
know.
has to, but I mean.
well, I'm
by
not
law.
talking about, I'm
But
talking about
I talked
civilians.
to Steve again today and he is definitely retiring. I told him by the first year, we would try to get a letter from him stating that, Darlene's having some issues, so, but she still says she's retiring, so.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that, needed to be done right away with that part.
Well, we wanted to get it in the salary ordinance. If we don't use it, then we'll just move the money around, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're okay with the fire department, the 3% for those top 3 officers.
Well, the fire department,
I mean, sorry, the police department.
Oh, I'd like to have like 15%.
Well, I just want to make, I thought I heard somebody say 5% at one point for those. for the-
right. So Corby, I asked to plug that back in as 5% for the deputy chief and commander and keep them on hourly.
Yes, I will mention though, if we increase those police, like the deputy chief for the police to 5%,
Mhm.
that will put his pay rate, his base pay rate above the chief.
Well, the chief, yeah.
Well, the chief doesn't seem to mind that.
That's not what the chief said. The chief said I wanted to make sure that he could get overtime because of cases.
Right, and the council's desire is to have all of our department heads at 72,100. So
So I guess the deputy chief will make more money then.
if you're comfortable with that,
All right.
I just think it'll create an organizational issue.
But don't we have right now,
Guaranteed.
the deputy chief with the 3% raise, right?
Yeah, that's what, maybe I'm not being clear on that.
Yeah.
Right now, I have the police chief, the deputy chief, and the commander at a 3% raise. And the
Right.
reason I did that is because that keeps the chief at one of your 4 officer rates. That puts the deputy chief just below him and the commander just below him.
Right, and I think that's okay, but what we're saying is once the deputy chief starts making overtime, there's a good chance he will surpass the chief.
Yes, and I think the chief is okay with that.
Yeah, and that's why I think keep it at 3%.
Now, keep it at 3% and keep them at hourly,
And he still gets his
and then there's still the hierarchical.
overtime. So if he really does put in extra hours for the day or the week, he would get more money.
Yes,
So from a year to date, how much money the man makes, he will surpass the chief. Unless he only works 40 hours a week.
That happens all the time. It happens in the fire department. It happened in the fire department for years.
My patrol commander made more than me this year because he worked a bunch of overtime because of people were off.
Right.
I had people off sick, I had people out of surgery, I had an officer die. I mean, there was a ton of overtime available.
Right.
You know, so he's gonna make more than me. You can't base it off of overtime.
I think you should-
Correct. I agree with
Fire
you.
chief overtime.
So it sounds like Corby, we're gonna keep it the way you have it in the spreadsheet.
perfect, sounds good. Just wanted to make sure I was hearing that correctly.
3 or 5, Randy, what did we?
I don't know.
We didn't decide.
Why are you asking me?
Next to Carl, it says 3 right now.
Yes, it does. No, he's at 3 and so is Kilgore,
And he
right?
gets
They're both
over.
at 3.
Right.
But everybody else is at 5 in the department.
The
Yeah.
5% would put, if I may,
Yes, please.
would put the deputy chief at $72,230.08
On base pay.
on an annual
Base pay.
equivalent. That would put your commander at $70,766.54.
So if we left them just at the 3% and they're still available for overtime, they're probably gonna make more than the chief anyways, most likely.
But they're working for it.
Correct.
They're working
Correct.
for it. That's
Base
right. That's right. Yeah.
That makes more sense.
If that makes more sense to you, I'm fine with it. None of it's perfect. I mean,
No,
it's
part-
making
part,
sausage,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's what this is. It's,
Bill, are you? does that
And the
make sense
reason,
to
and the
you?
reason chief
My
has,
deputy chief making more than me?
Well, the 3% versus the 5% versus making more than you, yes.
Yeah, I understood the 3%. I think I
Okay.
understood why you were doing the 3% prior
Okay.
to, I don't know why he was being changed to 5%. I just didn't want him to be put on salary. I wanted him to
I
stay
got
where
you.
he
Bill,
was.
okay,
Okay,
we understand.
now where there's clarity, I understand it now.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, so leave that at 3% as of right now, Corby.
I think as far as salaries and wages go, unless you guys have additional comments, the only thing that I would really need to know is if we want to hire this 13th firefighter.
Say what?
If we want to hire the
Hire
13th
13th.
firefighter. I think based on what the conversation was with the clerk, looking at where we're at this year on overtime and part-time Corby and being able to reduce that overtime, it makes some sense to look at this 13th firefighter.
So I will get
Will we be able to visit the police officer again then?
What do you got? What's in the budget, Jen, for police officers as far as total numbers?
We kept it at the 21
21, yeah.
officers. I mean,
So we still
If
have to
you guys wanna-
replace who, Smoot?
Yeah, I'm in the
Yes.
process of replacing 2 right now because the last one on that list is not, can't be hired right now.
Jacob Wyrick?
The
Okay.
one we presented in front of you as
Yeah,
a perf issue
Oh,
Oh, okay.
that I can't talk about in the meeting. So,
Understood.
um,
Oh, and speaking of perf,
mhm.
I've had some meetings with legislators. We're going to work on that legislation, see if we can get it bumped to 45.
I'm in. Love that. There's some
for
quality
school
people out there.
employees as well.
What's that, Bill?
There's some quality people out there. I'd love that. I
There
don't-
is. There's a ton of, and that's what I brought up to legislators I've talked to, is that when that 35-year age was adopted, that was some time ago,
Sure.
that,
Long time.
that 45 now is a little different than what it
Even
used to
40
be.
would make it.
40 would be great.
I want 45.
Yeah, 40 would be great.
You got to start high with legislators because they're probably going to chisel you down a little bit.
Yeah.
So
So-
we are
Maybe
working on that.
37.
Rick Niemeyer is going to work on getting me a hearing in the Senate. And we're going to craft some stuff. Aylesworth is going to work with me too on it. So hopefully we can get it in this legislative session get it through the hearing process and in front of the legislature for a vote.
Okay.
So-
As far as the replacements this year, I have 2. Officer Smoot resigned. So we have that position to fill, the vacancy to fill, and the other one that we can't talk about, we have to fill that vacancy. I know that next year I have Lieutenant Purcell leaving, so I have to fill that vacancy next year. And obviously, we did not get a new officer this year because we went for raises.
Went
So
for
next year, that's why I want to revisit that to try to increase, because you know that the number of homes are just increasing by the day. It's like weeds. I'm like, I can't believe how many houses keep
By the
going
day.
up. So, and our call volume's increasing. So,
How much has that call volume gone up? By
the last I
percentage?
looked, we were about 500 calls over last year. But
What's the
that,
percentage?
I would have to,
Base-
I'd have to pull numbers for you. So,
I'd be interested to
I'm
know based
guessing-
on like a per home volume,
yeah, I don't know.
like to
We
get
were
that
at
skew.
30% Up until COVID.
What does that mean, Todd? 30%?
30%
More
more
calls.
calls until COVID hit us.
How does that compare to the number of homes added?
I don't know. I'd have to pull the numbers to see how many homes were added at that particular time.
Gotcha.
So-
It's just an interesting
Mhm.
mathematical equation to
Right.
examine.
But I mean, there's so many residents going up and so many roads that, I mean, the patrolling is, we're going to need to increase that. So, and I know that you actually talked about it at the last meeting when they talked about increasing public safety because the town is increasing size so rapidly. So, but I would like to put that in there or get that in there. I know Jen and I talked about it.
Would it be right to update the probationary patrolman to an open position right now and remove the name that's on the list?
It's an open position, but I hope to have that filled before the end of 2020.
But as of today, that position is currently open.
That's correct.
We would add in
Another one.
the position that you're replacing Smoot with is not listed here, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Well, Smoot's in there.
Replacement.
Smoot
I'm sorry.
replacement, yeah.
Missed that.
So Smoot replacement and the open position with the probationary position is my goal would be to have that in front of you before the end of the year.
So you're talking about sometime next year adding a 22nd
That'd be
to the roster.
That would be correct.
It's January 1st, or could it be June 1st or July 1st, or would you have any idea?
Well, I would prefer that it would be in the middle of the year simply because if we get the 2 positions that were open right now, we're going to be training the first part of the year
Yeah.
with 2 people. And so
And what
it would
we,
be a process.
what we had talked about in a committee meeting was looking at ways to start somebody from the beginning with police academy and bring in
Right.
a younger person. And
one of
that
these
might be a
2
middle of the year hire.
Well, one of these 2 people that were interviewed, one's certified and one is not certified. Well, there's 5 people, but the 2 that were recommended One is certified, one's not certified, so we'd be sending that person if they were to go all the way to the academy.
So I guess in listening to this conversation, Corby, maybe a good thing to do would be looking at about half of the year of adding a 22nd officer as a possible proposal. Again, we do have some miscellaneous revenue from the Lennar development and the a sale of some property. Again, that's a 1-year hit. Okay, that's a 1-year number, but it does give us a little bit more cash balance to work with that might get us started on it. And if we see that halfway through the year that revenue projections are looking awful, then we can always, come back to the table and take another look at it. But at least getting it in a budget for halfway through the year might be a good way to at least have the spot open.
Okay, yeah, I'll add another, a 22nd full-time police officer for half of the year.
Half year, yeah.
Can we go back, before you leave public safety, I had a couple of things that kind of flew over. With the increase, the fire salaries, does that increase the starting wage by that amount as well, that 10% for a new firefighter?
It would.
Yeah.
All right, so we can add that 10% to the base salary of a current starting firefighter immediately.
Well,
I mean, for the
January
next
1.
person, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just raises for the current guys and it wasn't
No.
raising, it needs to raise the position.
Yep.
So that we get track, okay, thank you.
We are aware, Todd, you've reminded us over and over and over again.
I want you to recite it in your sleep.
Sometimes I go to sleep thinking about it,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
You didn't make a decision whether or not we could move Nick to get overtime or not?
Yeah, we did. We said we're gonna keep both chiefs in that position.
Well,
I mean,
no,
assistant
No,
chiefs.
The deputy, Nick
Right,
is
right.
currently not getting overtime.
Right now, Nick is salary exempt.
Oh,
Nick is
okay.
salaried, yeah.
He-
So
that's
Todd
right.
wants to move to salary
That's right,
non-exempt.
that's right.
A
I'm
question I
sorry.
have for you on that is, how is overtime decided with a guy like Nick? Does he
Well, I
just
mean-
work it and then we pay him, or do you have some oversight of that?
Yeah,
Are we
yeah, I
watching
mean,
hours?
If he gets paid the overtime, I will. Right now, I give him flex time. Like, he worked over the weekend because we did have a shortage and we needed somebody to work. And so I'm giving tomorrow and Thursday off, or Friday off, which now tomorrow we got another meeting we gotta go to that he's not gonna be able to take off but a half a day. So I've been flexing his time as much as I possibly can, but he trains, he's the head of training for our department. and he does-
One of the things I'd like to make sure of is that, if Nick can get overtime, is that it's not just he can have as much as he wants.
No.
Yeah, Joe.
With
It would
the,
only be under circumstances where we'd be on a fire or a call, the call overtime or a training overtime. That would be it.
with the fire department, the position would need to be determined then, whether it is still an administrative position or if it's a firefighter position. If it's an administrative position, then the overtime would be after 40. If it is a firefighter position and he's filling the role as a firefighter, EMT, paramedic, then that position, it's the overtime after the 106 hours in the 2-week period. And that was one of the reasons why we moved Nick into the salaried exempt position, was because of that
There was confusion.
uniqueness
Yeah.
of the fire department. So that determination would need to be made. And if you change that position then from a salaried exempt position to a salaried non-exempt position, you need to determine those hours so payroll has clarity, and we would need to amend the job description.
Right.
So right now, he's been in an administrative position right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so
And that's federal
Right, you can't mess
stuff. I
with
can't mess with that.
labor
Yeah.
laws.
That's how it is. And we've asked for some clarity from New Focus HR on that.
So what is that position, Todd? Is it administrative? Is it firefighter? I would look at a deputy chief as an administrative position.
Yeah, but he's a firefighter as well.
I understand, but just from we have to decide if we're gonna have him as a salary non-exempt,
Right.
that he qualifies for overtime. Is it after 106 hours or after 40 hours a week?
Oh, he would have to be after 40. I mean,
40 a week, Todd?
Yeah, I just.
And it would
I
be
can't-
calculated
I can't
based
ask
on his
the guy to
hour,
work
his
106
salary.
Hours and then pay him overtime. I mean, or 53 hours a week and then pay him overtime.
And that would be his
That
base
budget.
salary divided by that many hours. And that's all, not,
It's the same, I mean,
Your current firefighters are putting in right around that 100 to 106 in a
106.
pay period.
To get to
2
overtime.
weeks and then the next pay period is 96 hours.
So Nick is not doing the 24-hour shifts. He's doing
8 hours.
8 hours a day.
That's what he did.
So he's not hitting 106. All right.
The actual checkoff on that item from a labor standpoint is if you are using him to fill the firefighter, EMT, paramedic schedule, then he is a firefighter. If he's doing the administrative role, you're not using him to fill your schedule.
We're not doing
So
that.
that's,
You're not doing what?
He's not filling our schedule. He's got his own job. But what he will do is be an extra person if there's a call. I mean, he's going on calls. He's doing firefighting. He's just not working 24, 48s.
But isn't he also jumping in ambulance all the time?
Well, yeah, it's the same. It's part of his job description. Only person that doesn't do that is me.
it's just, if you're using him to fill the schedule, then according to labor laws, he is a firefighter, not an administrator.
So that's the
And
106, Jill?
that's the clarity. If you
Yeah.
can truly check that box when you do your schedule, Nick is not counted as part of your firefighter crew, then that is how that is determined.
I see him in bunker gear all the time.
But if he is a,
I'm not
That's
saying
not
that
what
he
she's
can't,
talking
I'm
about.
not saying he
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
respond because of the chain of command, but his primary role needs to be administrator. He can't be used to fill in because everyone's on vacation.
So we've been breaking the rules, is what you're
no,
saying.
no, we have not.
No?
First of all, I can schedule
Dude.
any hours I want,
Okay.
okay? And anything that and if it means covering a 12-hour shift on the ambulance, it means covering a 12-hour shift on the ambulance. As long as he doesn't go over 40 hours that week, then because there's no overtime.
But that's not
His job
true.
description says firefighter, EMT, and, a whole bunch of, a list of things that he can do.
Okay.
And I don't understand where, I just don't understand the difference.
That's for the job description and his primary duties. You have to be able to check that box.
Yeah. It's the same with engineering field. If you're an
Exactly.
electrical engineer, however, you pick up a multimeter and you do electrical PLC something in a factory or something, you then are qualified for your salary divided by the number of hours, and that's your hourly wage. You don't get anything above that. So I think it's the same for private sector. I mean, public.
The fire chief sets his schedule.
Okay. And I know what you're saying, Todd.
It's
But if you need
duties.
him 1 week, because you have a bunch of things going on, and he's willing to go on fire call all day Saturday, I think the guy should get paid for his all day Saturday fire call. If he's already worked 40 hours,
But
you
does
don't
that,
know.
under federal law, change his classification?
It does.
Yeah.
That's the question that Jill is.
That's where
Right, and
we're
I'm
at.
raising.
fighting for Nick, and Todd's saying, no, I keep track of it and I only make him, try to make it 40 hours. But the truth is, if it's Friday night and he's done with his 40 hours, and there's a big fire on Saturday that he goes on, he's now not getting paid.
I think we need an
Because he's a
opinion
salary
from
employee, that's why.
one of those
And what we
legal
do is, right,
experts.
We currently flex his time
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, I
Same
think,
thing that we do though.
yeah, it's the same as what you're doing.
Yeah.
But if you,
I have
But it's-
numbers for you, by the way,
Numbers,
that you were asking for. So at 4,005 incidents with 145 new homes last year. And we're up to 3,994 calls for service with 186 new homes this year
Just because he's got a gun.
so far.
yeah, he's stepping over you, Todd, just walking right over
So
you.
I propose,
Bulldozer.
Corby, I propose that we look at seeing what would happen if, Chief Todd, if we looked at seeing what would happen if we moved Nick to salary non-exempt instead of exempt. And Todd, what would a number be if you had to estimate the number of hours you would exceed per month per year? For Nick.
What he would do.
For Nick.
10 per month?
10 per week.
10 per week, yeah.
So you anticipated
I mean,
being,
if he works a 40-hour week
An additional?
and Friday night we get a structure fire, and he's out all night long on the call. What I do now is I just flex his time. And that's what we did over the weekend.
Okay.
He worked this weekend because he had training and stuff that he needed to do with a certain amount of people. And a bunch of stuff that needed to be done. So he worked Saturday and Sunday, and then he's gonna take this coming Thursday and Friday off. It's just shifted his schedule, that's all. It's administrative stuff. It wasn't fighting fires, but it was.
So you think it's really 10 per week? Could you live with 5 per week? I mean, because Carl doesn't abuse it,
Because
right?
that would eat up a lot of
Chief.
overtime if Nick's getting 10 per week. That would really take a chunk out of your budget.
That's what I'm saying. That's way too
When
much.
you hire, does it make a difference?
Go ahead, Jen.
It's an extra
I'm
week
just
a
saying,
month.
because we had discussed number 13.
Yeah,
So with the additional hire, that wouldn't bring that down some?
I just did some rough calcs and it'd be about,
What you saying?
if it's 10 extra hours a week, it's about
As far as
12,000 a
bringing
year.
10 hours of overtime a week down to 5 or something.
What did Corby say?
Would that 13,
13,000 a year?
12,000.
12,000?
would that
So
thir-
it's $1,000 a month more.
for 10 hours, Corby, or 5 hours?
10 hours,
10 hours a week?
yes.
And that's not,
I don't think it's that high.
we just can't, it probably isn't, John. We just can't predict it. It may be nothing that week, but yet.
But if you
next
want
week
him
it could
paid
be.
overtime, there's going to have to be some kind of
Yeah.
parameters on it.
Yeah.
You know, there's got to be a place where we say, okay, we can't just use Nick for everything.
Right. I
Right.
certainly get that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But can we do that under federal law?
If we make him non-exempt.
If he's, as long as he's an administrative position,
Can we, Jill?
At the same token, if Nick works 38 hours a week, his salary is still based on 40.
Yeah.
I'm just being devil's advocate here, but there's got to be some clarity in the position then and adding on the 13th person, because then you're changing the whole dynamic exactly of what you guys said of overtime.
Well, it's the same as deputy chief of police.
but it's not.
Well, it's not.
No,
Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the salaries set in the police department are also tied to their SOPs,
I
which
see.
ultimately result back to our salary ordinance, but they're set that way and they're actually on, you're based on 86 hours, I believe, for a biweekly cycle.
And that 86 hours in a biweekly again is a federal calculation.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's
So you
not,
don't get overtime until after 86.
Yes, unless it's authorized beforehand. So it's a special.
if it's like a grant or something.
And that's all spelled out in their
Yeah.
SOPs,
Yeah.
because
I see.
trust me, I've read that book. a
I got
couple
no
of times.
issues, making an SOP on it, or putting parameters on it. I just think it's only fair that if we're gonna do it on the police side, we should do it on the fire side.
So are we legally allowed to say, Corby, after 86 hours, Nick's assistant chief,
It'd be
He's
80 hours for
qualified.
him because
80,
he's
yeah.
administrative.
Right. so be 80.
What we could do
But not,
is-
can we say not to exceed, Corby? Is that allowed?
I would probably get a legal opinion there.
Good answer, Corby.
And one other thing too is I was doing per pay period instead of per week, so it's actually $23,000 a year.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, it seems like.
Yeah, that's.
So then the 5 would be 11 or 12.
Yeah,
But
part
yeah,
of the
the
reason
5
we
would be
went
about
up
the 12, yeah.
what, 10 grand on him this year was to kind of meet in the middle, meet in the middle on some of that estimated overtime
Yeah.
stuff. So we
Yeah.
kind of met in the
Did
middle this
something,
year.
Yeah.
And it was, it was 8,500 or 9 grand or something. It went up in that range. I can't remember.
What would be the 10% if we did it for Nick and then just left the overtime alone?
Just leave him as he is? Or
Leave him as a salary exempt, but a 10% bump.
it'd be about another 3,800.
Yeah.
That's a lot cheaper than 23,000 in overtime.
It
Or
is.
bump it to 5 like we kind of did with some of the police officers.
Well, the
Some
police
got
were,
3, some got
police were
5.
at 5 as a way to,
Yeah, to,
Even.
over a 2-year
yeah,
period,
over a 2-year
get the,
period.
Right.
get the balance in there from a increase
And that's why
standpoint.
the fire went to 10.
Yeah.
So rather than go to 10 for Nick, maybe we meet in the middle at 6 or something.
Well, if you go to 10% for Nick and keep him on salary exempt, it still saves us a good chunk in overtime.
It does,
Yes.
Randy. Yeah.
And that's what we're after.
Yeah.
Because the unpredictability of overtime is brutal.
Yeah, so that would take
You okay, chief, with that?
That would take Nick up
Okay,
to
okay.
668 and some
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But save us anywhere between 15 and 20 grand.
Yep. Yeah, overtime's brutal.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that sounds like a decent idea. Is just keep it simple, make him a salaried exempt. I think that's a decent idea.
yeah.
What do you
I'm
guys
for that.
think?
I'm good with it,
I'm
Randy.
for that, Randy, yeah.
If Chief Todd's okay with it.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Who cares?
You're gonna do it.
Exactly.
So to clarify, we're gonna.
Bill and I were even gonna be here
10% on
tonight,
Nick?
so I don't know.
I'm glad you guys are.
Yeah.
I-
Glad we are too.
No, this is the type of
Yeah, no. it's
collaboration that
real
we
good.
need. Go ahead, Jill.
We weren't.
So we were doing 10% on Nick, leaving him salaried exempt.
Yes,
Yes,
let's keep it simple.
Just want to make sure we summarized all that.
I'm okay with that. And then that puts him in a hierarchical position where it kind of makes more sense from a deputy chief standpoint. And then in future years, if you give the rank and file a bigger bump and give him the same as the chief, it keeps you in that range. So
yeah.
it makes some sense.
Yeah.
I'm actually happy, Randy.
Hey,
Can you say that again for the
I
record?
didn't wanna
Yeah,
do this.
are we taping this?
I didn't want to, I'm not repeating. Did it one time. That's it.
yeah, Todd won't tell us he's happy too long.
I got it on tape.
Yeah, it's all been recorded
You're
now.
happy for Nick, right?
It's in cyberspace now.
Like you said, you always reach for the
Yeah.
star. So that's what I did.
No, it's reasonable. I mean, that was a good debate. It was good that we had the dialogue and everybody's learning a little bit.
We could agree on.
That's the idea here, is that we leave this all having a little better knowledge of what the heck we're doing.
So, so council, since we all got, went from $7,500 to 12 grand a few months ago, do we want to give ourselves a 3% raise?
Yes,
Yeah.
I say yes to that because if we want to avoid another problem
we don't want to
10,
get caught
15,
like
20
we were
years from now.
before.
I mean, we won't be here, but
We won't be here, but somebody will.
Yeah, I'm going to beat Bob's record. That's my goal in life. Sorry, Bob.
Council, included in the numbers that are presented on these worksheets for you was the 3% for all boards and commissions as well as the council.
One of the things that we found in our efforts to fill these board and commission seats is when we were at $30 a month, basically, nobody wanted to do this stuff.
Yeah.
No,
I did it for $10 a meeting.
Look who.
And
No, no,
I
I'm
did
with
it,
you.
I did
I'm with
it
you.
for $30 a meeting when I was on the RDC back years ago when Todd's dad appointed me to it. But having a good team is extremely important to making sure that the citizens are properly served.
People that'll stay,
Yeah.
not leave after a year like I did.
And qualified people, folks that are engaged in it, willing to work, show up at meetings, show up at extra meetings, do all the things that they're asked to do.
Yeah, we want to.
And right now, I think we have a pretty good team.
Yeah, we do.
Within your estimates, within the Form 1s, in regards to the boards and commissions, I did budget as if each board and commission were to have 2 special meetings. That way, when we do have,
Okay.
that,
Joint meetings and stuff.
yeah, that way,
Okay.
our line items are okay and we're not scrambling to make a transfer from someplace.
That's reasonable.
Good, that's good.
Very good.
Go ahead, Jim.
Sorry, since we were on boards and commissions, on the sheets under redevelopment commission, Randy, you're the member of the redevelopment commission. If you were going to continue having one council member who's unpaid from the redevelopment commission, or do you want us to budget for that position?
Just
In
so we
case you
have it in there.
choose to, in case January, December, January, you choose to fill it a different way.
I think that with everything that's going on in the town, it is good to have
Yeah.
a voting member from the council, whether it's me or
Right.
somebody else
And
on
And
that
that's what I
commission.
just- Yeah. I wanted
And,
to
and in
make
that
sure.
case, that helps us save a little money too.
Mhm.
And in all reality, technically by state statute, the entire council could be the redevelopment commission if we so chose to.
I just want to make sure for budget purposes that we didn't
But I like it
short
better
it by
with,
one person
Yeah, I
and then
think
all of a
so, too.
sudden we add someone in and we're
Yeah.
short. So
Yeah.
that's all
but
I was
I
checking.
know in Cherville, the council is the redevelopment commission.
Exactly.
And that's the way it is in a lot of towns, but we've chosen to keep the majority citizen appointment, and I think that's good. But having one council member, I think is good for some of that continuity that we've been seeking, and it's actually helping this year. We have so many commercial things kind of in those early stages that we're going to need that cohesiveness.
Just wanted to
I say
double
whether
check
it's
for-
me or somebody else.
And Randy, I did have a question for Jen. Jen, I read an email, and are you good with your department, including yourself? Or do you want to debate and discuss and/or anything? Because now's a good time.
I may. There was a discussion that I wanted
Thank
to
you.
have with the Council Affairs Committee. Unfortunately, each time the committee met in person, we were unable to have each member of that committee present. So my request, I did not bring up. I did have a request prepared for the committee to consider. I did make an off the cuff remark. It seems that my plans were taken out of context. The discussion was always meant to happen. Knowing that we would have a budget workshop because we had it on the schedule before we would even go into the public hearing. It was always the intent to have a discussion with everyone. I guess my original email yesterday where I had stated my intention, in my mind, that was just to make sure that we are budgeting properly, knowing that there's always a discussion. It's like a placeholder. We still have to do the public hearing. We still have to do the adoption. We still have to do the salary ordinance. We still have to adopt the salary ordinance. So we had plenty of time to discuss. So I've given you all a copy of my original request letter that was to be shared with the committee. I've also given you all some thoughts that have been weighing on me the last 24 hours. So it's all for you to consider. It's right in front of you. With the duties and responsibilities of my office, I believe that a bump in the salary is due based on looking at, I think how the clerk treasurer's department was written in the past was wrong. Yes, there's always been that step up availability, but if you actually look at each item, it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't make cohesive sense. The step ups, not quite proper. So my idea was to.
Can you expand on that a
step
little
up.
bit about the step up and what makes it improper?
So the way I have seen other towns and cities do it is it's almost like an additional stipend. So each time that accreditation is received, whether it be your IAMC, your CMC, your MMC, now there's CPS, there's the CPM, there's all kinds of certifications through the Association of Public Treasurers of the US and Canada. I can't remember all those letters because those are like 5. Michael Griffin has them all. It's you got to work to get that one. Those others have done it where if you receive that accreditation, then it adds 25 cents to your hourly rate. Obviously, since I am salary, it would be,
We have the tiers established
Yes.
based on accreditations.
Yes, so in my mind, it should be even like that. We should discuss and we should figure out, how that should be. But also, I think having a tier system like that can also put an unfair advantage for whoever may come in or disadvantage for whoever may come in the future. Maybe after me, somebody who previously held a high accountant position or something comes in. But if they don't have any accreditations through the clerks or the treasurers, through these different organizations, then based upon how the salary ordinance is written, that starting clerk treasurer rate is quite low. When you look at other municipalities in similar size to us, those around us, our base is very low when looking at all the others.
Just your position here in your mind or your whole team?
My team, I would love to bump them up. I honestly believe somewhere in the 5% range would be fantastic. The town is constantly growing. The ladies within my office are responsible for utility billing, payroll, employee records. I mean, it's the hours spent just trying to get and gather all the information of folks moving to town and closing on homes, getting all those done and properly adjusting the bills, because we bill for the current month for each of our set fees, but water is always billed in arrears. So when you have those new homes come in and then somebody closes, the beginning of the month, 10 days after the water's been read, then we have to go get another water read. Then we have to, there's a lot of work involved with what they do on a daily basis. And unfortunately, my staff is we're starting to have a high turnover rate within my office. When I took over as clerk treasurer, I did not hire right away the accounts payable. I continued to do those duties, and then my work was checked by somebody else within the office, because we have to have proper checks and balances. One person cannot do one job. So I did hire, so it was November of last year when I received the resignation of my payroll clerk at the time. So I hired another payroll clerk full-time, and then I also hired a part-time clerk to teach AP to, so that I would not have to continue doing those duties as well, because it was taking a lot of hours to get my clerk treasurer duties and get the AP duties done. There's just not enough hours in any day, no matter how many hours I would stay after. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and then the full-timer that was hired to fulfill that payroll position did not work out. The part-timer, I offered her to bring her on full-time, and she's been absolutely fantastic since we've been able to bring her in. She actually has been more of a floater for us. She's been doing payroll on the payroll weeks and AP on the off payroll weeks. But unfortunately, the pay is not enough, and she gave me her resignation. Her final week will be next week. So I will.
Which girl is this? Gail
No, that would be Miss Monroe.
or Jen?
So my office will be down 2 full-timers again, which means myself and the staff remaining will have to pick up the duties again, which we will do because we've always done it.
Did you start applying for that position again?
No, unfortunately, this is the worst time of year. When I did it last year, it was a nightmare. I would much rather wait until after we completed the budget and the salary ordinance. So probably not until December is my hope. I mean, I'd love to say November.
So
but
you can
everybody
operate
else does.
without an extra person?
We have to,
Why not just hire someone now?
because it's very difficult to
Because,
find somebody and to also spend the time going through that vetting process.
wow, I think if I was losing somebody next week, I would already have a new position posted as a non-clerk treasurer person. That's how I
Unfortunately,
think.
with going through the budget,
Yeah, I get it.
I don't want
Couldn't you
to,
have her tag team with one of your employees? Just be a shadow?
well, unfortunately,
ropes?
due to the pandemic, we don't want to, we've already had to separate our staff, and that's why we also got rid of our part-time staff. We don't have the space.
Yeah, I think if you're having these kind of issues and difficulties, we're all here. We're a team. There's no I in team. So, when I do feel as though having all these pressures build up and explode, And also not disclosing some of the things that were brought to light are never good either, but, you know, you don't need to try to carry the whole department on your back. This is a team up here.
Right.
And we're all here for you to help you. You can communicate with us in vet rather. So,
I mean, I think you'll have a lot of applicants because in clerical, you know, in county, they're making in the mid-20s. But like you said, you don't want somebody close to each other training when we're supposed to stay away from each other.
Isn't
Because
that
I have that
Andy?
in my office now where they're like, the nurse will come in and say, you guys are standing too close together, but yet we have on masks. So I understand that, but I mean, at some point you're gonna have to train
Unfortunately,
someone.
in seeing how the last hiring process went for us, we didn't receive many applications because starting salary is low.
Was it like 32?
Well, they've got her, this one right here right now is what, 26? Or no, she was at 27,000.
But
Janice,
that's,
yeah.
I
that's,
think
that's
there's
based
people
on
that
her
work too.
current rate. If we're talking the payroll clerk as the position sits right now, based on our current salary ordinance, it does have a max of $18 an hour, but it's very hard to find somebody who is qualified, who has not necessarily an HR degree, but who has some sort of background in payroll and benefits. And it's just difficult to find somebody who's willing to take on the level of work, the level of responsibility, it's a lot of stuff that you can't disclose to anybody. It's a lot of personal information. It's a lot of keeping HIPAA, and once people really get in there and realize it's a lot of responsibility.
Breathe, Jen.
No kidding.
But you gotta fill that. I mean,
Yeah, it has to be filled. You just gotta put up, you gotta
even
hire
if they're
someone.
only like learning by observing in the beginning.
But
You guys got to
unfortunately-
understand though, you can't fill it that fast. It just cannot be done. It's just same in police and fire. You can't fill it with just any average Joe citizen because there's too much information that pertains to each one of us, personal information. And that you can't fill it like that. You have to go through the process just like you do the police and fire. So that's why it's a struggle with her plus the time of the
We just
year.
have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's difficult.
It's a lot of
Yes,
work.
especially with the requirements in order to get our budget, public hearing posted, everything we've discussed tonight, get those updates made within Gateway, get Gateway updated and have our submission done on time because we have to have those 10-day periods between the public hearing and my focus right now is the budget to make sure that everything is done properly because there's little wiggle room. Once we get that 1782 notice back from the state, that's pretty much it. And unfortunately, this year, I can guarantee that our 1782 notice, we will not receive it before the end of the year. With the refunding of the bonds, we're probably looking at January when we're actually going to get that notice back.
When did you get the resignation notice, or when did she tell you, or like just last week?
A
Or,
couple of weeks ago.
and when's her last day, this Friday?
Next Wednesday.
Okay.
so she brought up Michael Griffin, so I Googled Michael Griffin's salary, it came up $885,000 a year. He's a football player.
Is that right?
Oh, my
The kid at my
God.
school named Michael
Mr.
Griffin as
Griffin
well.
makes over
The 8
$83,000.
is probably
Is that
right.
right?
The 8's right. Yeah. The 8 is correct. But he's been doing it how many years? He's been there forever,
He's been there.
for a long time.
So if you wanted to talk to the Council Affairs Committee, I mean, telephones still work, conference calls.
In my mind, an ask this big was something that was to be had in person.
But to at least get it started, get the dialogue started would have been helpful to at least have that conversation. I mean, Jill sent a request to myself, Rick, and Ralph recently with some of the organizational changes for an additional meeting, and we're going to work on a date. But even a request like that saying, hey, I want to sit down with you guys, let's pick out a date where it's just us, where we can talk about something and we can run it by the rest of the council. I mean, those sorts of communication tools, they're there. As far as you wanting a 5% for your whole staff, I think Tim would like that too. But we put together 3% this year, partially on your guidance for the whole town
And
staff.
that's what I did. He asked me a question,
Right.
so I answered.
And that's fine.
No, that's fine. Yeah,
But
that's-
part of the reason that 3% was there is because our focus was on public safety, and this was based on our revenue analysis that we had done partially by London Whitty before, and then by Crone, that there was something that we could afford.
Absolutely.
And
That's
as far
why
as-
you'll see in my budget one estimates, that is what I budgeted for my staff, is the 3%, same as all
Yeah.
the others.
And as far as your salary goes, if I'm not mistaken, when you took office, it was 39,000, correct? Or in that ballpark, 39 something without any accreditation.
And it was just over 43, I believe.
I thought it was
just under 40.
under 40, and then we bumped it over 43 to get you above Margot. And then
But
you
you were
went and got an
under Margot. You were
accreditation.
under Margaret.
I thought she was like 38 something when.
It
But
was
I
like
don't know, whatever,
39
whatever,
something.
whatever.
And,
Yeah.
and then you got an accreditation, you got one of your credentials, right?
Yes, I got my AAMC in August, so maybe that's where I'm getting the 43 from.
Yeah, and then we bumped it again to just over 50
Mhm.
and kind of created a little higher tier for that bottom. One of the disadvantages to having a really high paid elected job is a whole bunch of people are going to want it.
With the amount that I suggested, it is still very low.
Right, but if you look at our public works employees, a lot of them, if they were working in the private sector, they would be making 3 times what they're making
Yeah,
in
they make
public
way more.
works because of operating engineers and union jobs that do construction. So, I mean, I understand your ask and your desire. I disagree with it, and it's okay. I'm one person. There's 7 members of the council. I think what we've done in raises for your personal position has been substantial, and I think it was raises that were deserved to get that floor up higher. But I don't think looking at the rest of our team that going that much higher up to 60,000, which would be basically almost 21,000 in 2.5 years, would be justifiable to the rest of everybody else. It's just, like I say, one man's opinion. Not attacking you. I think that you've done some things very well. I can say from day one, that first meeting you sat in, you were a bit nervous, and I had questions for you. And if I look at how much you've grown since then, it's a lot. You've definitely taken a lot of steps and grown into the position. I think you have a great foundation, a lot of smarts. And as you gain those accreditations, I think it justifies looking at maybe even bigger increases on the top tier for those sorts of accreditations. That's just my opinion.
My question is, are you eligible, like say in 2021 for any more accreditations? And then if so, can we,
Depends on the pandemic.
and if so, as you get them, we would increase a little at a time, but like it's nothing personal at all. But I think to give a $10,000 raise or close to 10,000 and, with all these police and fire, you do make less than the other clerk treasurers, but we have to look at what accreditations they have and how long they've been doing it. And I just think 10,000, like you said, how much over 2 years? And it's nothing personal. You're very, very well versed already. But I think as you get more accreditations, we can like justify bumping it up.
And when you say, compared to the other clerks
In
and
the
those who
area.
have their accreditations, if you look at some of the current Clay County clerk treasurers, many are like me. They are only an IAMC. Yes, folks like Michael Griffin, who has been around a while and has much knowledge. I count
But
on
the
him
years
a lot.
I'm looking.
Absolutely. I understand that.
I mean, when you ran for this position, was that's the way the pay was set up already and you were okay with it and ran for the position?
When I took over, it was August 31st. when I was caucused in. We were already in the middle of the budget season. It would have been absolutely asinine to try and attempt any changes within 5 weeks.
But you've gotten support on taking some pretty good steps in a couple of years. And I think Colleen's onto a good point. It's like, we all signed up for our offices knowing what it is, what we get paid. Did we vote ourselves a raise last year? And are we moving with the employees this year? Yes, but it's still at this kind of if you look at a 20-year picture of the council from the time they raised themselves before to the last time, it would have come out to less than 1% a year. So I don't know. I'd say, just my opinion, I appreciate you presenting this tonight and having this conversation with us face to face. I think it shows a lot of character in you to do that. And I definitely appreciate that. So thanks for bringing that to us. And like I say, I'm one of 7, so everybody has their own opinions.
That's right. And, when I look at the salaries for the clerk treasurer department, and then I, think about, okay, and I'm not being sexist, I think, okay, you have secretaries in that department, and in this case, they're all females, but down at Public Works, we have a secretary. Is that what her title is? And she makes considerably more. I think you're definitely underpaying your staff.
My ladies are not secretaries.
No, I understand. But we have a secretary making more than your clerks are at your windows dealing with the public. Same job as theoretically our Public Works staff is doing. So I think
Tim might debate you on that.
Yeah, maybe. But I think there is need for parity for you to build higher, better people. I think you're too low for your team.
But how do we do all of this?
Yeah,
John?
I don't know. I don't think maybe we can this year, but I just think that this is something that you absolutely need to bring up a little bit in order to get and retain employees. No different than public safety, but
And I think
we're
that one
focusing
thing
on
that
one thing at a
COVID,
time
one
this
thing
year.
that COVID taught us from administrative standpoints is that there's a lot of administration in private business and in public entities
Right.
that basically was non-existent during COVID, and everybody still functioned. How did that happen?
My
Productivity.
staff had to show up. We still had payments to process. We still had deposits to process timely. The State Board of Accounts guidelines, the rules and regulations that we are governed by, we still had to maintain. We still had to make sure we had our proper checks and balances.
Are there technological opportunities for investment in things like software that can help streamline some of those systems? Because in most cases in accounting, that technological curve is advancing so fast as it relates to accounting software that it's hard to keep up with the changes, but there's things that streamline things so beautifully where there's one entry point and it spits out everything you need.
We have pretty good software, but I mean.
Do all of our people know how to use it to its full capability?
Yes, but I mean, when you're spending days just getting through payments to process the payments timely. Sure, we have payments that are made online. We have payments that are received to the bank and we just have to pull in the import files. That takes no time at all. I'll give you that. But we still process so many checks. And unfortunately, a lot of people nowadays prefer to pay through their banks. So we receive a bank check and those still have to manually be entered. Then all of that data entry has to be checked over to make sure we balance correctly so that we don't end up at the end of the day where we have an almost $100,000 deposit and we've got to rifle through all those receipts to find out where the typo was made. We have to make sure we have our proper internal controls.
So in this breakdown here, there's a position that says open 3. What does that mean? There's an open position.
Randy, that was just my, it's a position that specifically those accounts payable clerks, those were positions that Sue had budgeted for in the rate case. So I had added those into my master file. And then I guess kind of hearing some of this.
So I guess, by the way, it
maybe
looks,
wise to keep
if we
them
have
there.
a successful rate case, there's a possibility that we have a little more money available that we could either hire another person, like on a part-time basis, or possibly incorporate that money into current salary structure. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, that's something you could do, yes.
So maybe that's something we need to look at, Jen, from a departmental standpoint, is if we do have some success on the utility side in that rate case, maybe that's a way that we can take what's there and find a way like Bill did to invest it in the people.
Hey, Corby, did you also add open two under the clerk treasurer's
Yeah,
department?
open 2 and open 3 were both from Sue. Those were positions that she had budgeted for or presented to the IURC.
Okay,
Yes, and then I do know that at least one, the open one, I believe, was already there. That was a position that Jennifer knew needed to be filled. But the
yeah,
other 2 were directly from Sue.
So if we have some success, which I know that Rick and I have been requested to be a part of a conference call on a possible settlement agreement with the OUCC. I don't know what they're going to propose yet for settlement.
wow,
But our attorneys have been really banging on it hard,
wow.
presenting evidence.
Well, that's
So it's
good
looking
news.
like we're fighting and starting to close the gap with them. So once that's done and we get a handle on that, that might be an opportunity to, after the first of the year, even revisit this. Because since it's coming out of utilities, not a DLGF thing, and then we could look at how we could beef up our utility department a little bit. I think that's reasonable to take a look at that.
I would like that consideration to my chief deputy as well. Margot has been outstanding.
Yeah.
She does a lot.
Yeah, it's fine. I think after we get to that point,
Yeah, it's
we
all,
can do it however you want.
it's all revenue based at
Yeah.
that point, and if we have the revenue and it's been approved
Yeah,
based on these submittals to the OUCC, then
Yeah.
that's an opportunity to address some of these shortcomings.
right. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jim.
Council, when you look at this document too, just so you know, those who are hourly, their hourly rates are listed as what they're currently making.
Mhm.
Our salary ordinance lists a not to exceed amount for hourly people. Of course, many are at the max, some of these are not. So whether it's one department or another. So when you consider your salary ordinance, do you want us to leave that not to exceed amount in there for that hourly, which could allow for that small raise during the middle of the year when they have an evaluation? You know, sometimes it's a quarter. But that's how the salary ordinance was written. But to give you a true number of what the employees of the community are making, and what are, you know, what everyone's true salary is, that's what's listed here. So while someone, for example, maybe making $15 an hour, that position could be a not to exceed $17 an hour. And it was started at 15 with the anticipation of some of those building up. We did the same thing with people in the building department, such as Tammy and my administrative assistant. You started them, you know, an evaluation was done and there's some raise. So I just
Interesting.
wanted to get some
Corby, what's your
clarity-
opinion on that?
clarity on that. We did, you know, ask Corby to,
Well, considering
Consider
most
all
of that
of
is
this.
utility, that'll be all utility based at that point.
Mhm.
If we redo that, it doesn't affect our DLGF, but what's your analysis from a financial standpoint of that, Corby?
Yeah, you know, different communities do different things. I've seen communities that do, you know, their salary ordinance is strictly what they intend to pay their employees the next year. There are communities that do kind of what you guys have done historically, and generally those are the larger communities that basically set a not to exceed amount. But, you know, what we can do is do a combination of both. We can have a master schedule that says, here's a job, a description, and a maximum pay. And then we can attach maybe an exhibit or an attachment that maybe lists out specifically the starting salary by not employee name, but maybe by some kind of other description, what their pay will be. So those are kind of the options there. The salary ordinance, it's binding to the maximum. You cannot exceed that amount without some kind of amendment.
Yeah, and I think from a standpoint of not having to go back to the well to do multiple amendments, it might be a good idea to try and incorporate these numbers that Sue provided as part of the rate case
Mhm.
as a way to develop a range.
Okay, well,
Right.
that's what I want to make sure. We wanted to show you a true picture
Yeah.
of what everyone was making. So for example, in the Public Works Department, if someone starts, I'll use the dollar amount of $15 an hour. They get their CDL. Traditionally, it's been, you get a $1 increase because you earn that CDL.
I have a CDL.
Well, you get an extra $1.
lose
You
your
work in
dollar.
Public Works.
I want an extra $1. What's that, Tom?
But that,
It doesn't mean you don't have to drive.
you know, but that's one of those certifications.
I agree.
That's one of those certifications that, you know, you're held to a higher standard, as far as the CDL goes, you're held to a higher standard, whether you're working or not, you know, when you
But
go
I
out.
can tell you,
So-
looking at Public Works guys, guys with CDLs, my top driver this year is gonna make a little over 100,000.
Wow.
So that's why you'll see
So
some
if you look at some of
difference.
their salaries, it's like,
That's why there,
Yeah.
there's some difference in your
Yeah, it's
full-time
true.
public
They're home
works
every night,
salaries.
they are.
There's a price
I'm
for that.
listening.
Feed America.
It's all through this document. So if you wanted a comparison of what the current not to exceeds are, if we added them into those positions and we can do a comparison and see how much that would affect the budget, if that would be all right with you. But like I said, we wanted to show you the true and didn't want to bring you back a balloon number.
And if that makes you feel any better, Chief Fisher and Chief Wilkening, my top guy will make substantially more than what I do. So
And,
it is what it is. Does it?
and that was reason, I mean, when Jen stood up here and said she's having a hard time hiring a person, and then I look at 27 grand a year, and then I look at the clerk down at the Public Works making 30, will make 38.5. That's why I made the comment I made earlier. I just think, this is your department, you're building it, you're running it, it's your world.
So, but looking at what we have.
But we
from a
have to be
potential
fiscally responsible,
flexibility
yeah.
from a revenue standpoint, we might have the opportunity to.
Right,
close
and I
that
think
gap.
what we discussed at the end of the discussion when she was at the podium is awesome.
Yeah, there's some good ideas there.
Yeah.
But
I'm, by the way, the guy that eats the last piece of pizza. That's why I brought that subject matter up. So Jen, I didn't know you had all this prepared, but thank you as well.
as Corby's preparing the salary ordinance for us and tying it to this budget, are we good with preparing that salary ordinance with those ranges
Yes,
consistent with what we currently have and the respective raises that you discussed in the spreadsheet?
yes.
Yes.
And I
Okay.
think it's consistent with our rate case proposal as well, because
Correct.
those ranges then tie into the projected revenues needed to run the department.
There's a small adjustment on, I believe I noticed 2 of them, and Corby and Jen and I can catch up on those tomorrow. There's a distribution in RDC that we just need to move over into
Okay.
wastewater.
Oh,
And
okay.
those are minor. They're not gonna, it's only $1,400 and $2,000 on the annual equivalent. So I
And
just wanted
Jennifer,
to-
you're supposed to have something entered by Saturday morning?
It is,
We can kind of discuss maybe what the next steps of this budget process are. Yeah, the next step would be if we want to have the public hearing on October 6th,
Yeah.
we need to have the Form 3 submitted by Saturday. The only thing in submitting the Form 3 that the unit ultimately is binded to, it's kind of like, your upper bounds. Whatever budget you enter in there, that's your upper budget, limit. You cannot budget more than that without kind of restarting the whole budget process. And then kind of same with the levy. If you want to, essentially what I would suggest to Jennifer, and I'm going to review, before it ultimately gets submitted, is that we're going to advertise high in this public notice. We'll probably put in, at least a 10% budget buffer in there per department and per fund, as well as a 10% levy increase. It'll be over the maximum. But again, that's just in case something happens. We will have that flexibility down the line.
Sounds reasonable. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
with the discussions we had tonight, for the most part, it sounded like, other than a couple of minor little things, there's pretty good consensus of the direction. So I would say that it's reasonable to submit that in that fashion, Corby.
Yes.
Anybody else have any comments, questions, ideas, proposals?
No, I'm glad you guys put this together and
This-
like I said,
I
you
think
know,
this is
good.
probably the most informative
Yeah.
budget workshop we've had, at least in my 10 years.
It's
on the
fact.
council.
It's fact.
There's a lot of information tonight. So really good. And Jen, thank you for your work on it. It's appreciated. The hours spent definitely aren't unnoticed.
Randy, one thing that I know you may have brought up, or I can't remember, somebody brought it up at the last Council Affairs Committee, was something about the riverboat distributions. I reached out to the Lake County Treasurer to see if I could just hear something about a distribution. The only thing that I got back is that there will be a distribution. What that is, I have no idea. So that's a little
I
tricky.
think we all expect that with there being basically 3 months where the casinos were almost completely closed, that it's gonna go down. I mean, it has to. There wasn't taxes collected, so how can they be distributed?
Historically, Lake County always gives us our distributions extremely late. So cash flow is potentially an issue within.
Okay.
Well, Mayor Stahara doesn't have quite as much money these days as he used to have. That wasn't nice.
Nice
To put
job.
into the casino, that is.
Well, in summary, local safety point increase for.
There's a lot of fire
You
chief
heard
math
something
going
like
on
that,
over there
Chief,
right
yeah.
now. No, we have different calculators. Yeah. By the way, we did get some preliminary numbers back from Baker Tilly on the fire territory, tax impact, general fund impacts, levies, all those different things. And Kevin is working on getting a meeting together with Mike Schilling from St. John and one of us from Cedar Lake for next week. I spoke with Paul Panzik and Jerry Sweats also about the fire territory. And although their planning director will be our new town manager, there's no hard feelings and we are moving forward with that discussion. They're interested in it, very interested in the numbers. So there is some positive movement on that front. So I'm hopeful that we will start to see some fruit being bore from the trees there that we're working on in putting together this territory. Difficult process.
One more item for the work session.
Yep.
One of the things you guys have been talking about is the CCD fund, cumulative capital, improvements to the fire station. If Jen or Corby can explain a couple of those. It's on page 11. I just wanted to make
So-
sure that that was one of the items we had discussed.
So just in solidarity, Todd,
Just so.
I've
it's out
explained what disrepair the fire department's in and that we've got to make the living quarters and the foundation of it sound. Even if we can't spend $1 million on a fire station, we've got to do something that makes it livable and workable because it's in pretty tough condition. Go ahead, Jen.
So I look at the published line on page 11 because I must have accidentally hit the adopted line. So some of the numbers are off by give or take 5,000.
What is page 11? I don't see a page number.
This one.
On the Form 1s
On the
I
Form
gave
1,
you.
I'm sorry.
Yep, we're back to regular line items now,
Okay,
no
thanks.
salaries. So here's my anticipation for CCD for 2021. We have the 2019 police squads we're making payment 2 of 3. That's just over 35,000. We have the 2019 fire truck payment 2 of 8. That's just over 47,000. You'll see that the improvement line item, which is actually on page 12, because CCD is split, Improvements, I've bumped up to 60,000. That 41,000 of that is to cover the anticipated striker equipment that you all approved, to get the much needed equipment for the ambulances. And then it gives us a little bit of wiggle room to make some other improvements as we move forward. Buildings, buildings is kind of an oddball for CCD. We had only put that in just recently because we knew the buildings need some repairs. Like with this year, the furnace next door at the PD department completely died. And I mean, it was old. It was
Very
it was awful. So that had to be replaced. So I've put a line item in there because there's been discussions on needed repairs, but there hasn't actually been any, okay, what's the game plan? Where are we going to start? What's it going to cost us? What, maybe what little projects can we knock out of the way?
So before we put too much money into an astronomical fire station or police station, are we still visiting that idea of a police and fire?
I think we have to. What we're looking at doing is just shoring up the fire building enough so guys can live in there.
Sure.
And that we're not running water through the foundation and stuff like that. So, we're not looking at a full rebuild, just enough to improve the living quarters. So when a person's on their 24-hour shift, they don't feel like they need a shower right when they leave. But yeah, you're right. I think we need to continue that planning process of the larger improvements.
And Bill, you may not know this, in this, I'll be quick, but I had asked Don Oliphant to take a look at that land where Dickie Henn's building that house and large garage to see if that made sense for a campus for police and fire, and in the lay of the land in the back there drops off so much that it really wasn't adequate for proper parking, et cetera. So just so you know, there's other ideas that we're
I mean, the current fire
contemplating.
station location, is pretty nice. I mean, Todd and I have talked about it.
The admin building would be ideal to get our hands on that.
So here's the interesting thing that came out of, and not to change subjects, but I'm going to, the fire territory discussion. The numbers that came back for net assessed value, St. John is at about 1.5 billion. And Cedar Lake's at about 670 million.
Wow.
They are that much higher than us in net AV.
Double?
Almost triple.
More than double.
1.5 billion. Yeah, it is
And-
almost triple.
And so if you look at, people always compare with St. John
Yeah.
wages and all that stuff.
We can't.
When they got a net AV that's almost triple of
Well, their
ours,
demographic too. I mean, their household income is probably $1.60.
their per house demographic too with value. And I mean, it's a different. Huh?
I don't know why they want to do a territory about that kind of.
Well, I think it's to find a way to leverage, if you add Hanover and Cedar Lake with St. John, it's putting us at almost 2.5 billion in net AV. So you have an opportunity to spread resources, and Cedar Lake's going to grow and catch up to St. John, not completely, but we'll get close. So I think that's the big picture. It's long-term, looking at the opportunities to pool resources from here forward. But it's pretty interesting to look at.
That is interesting. Wow.
But sorry, go ahead, Jen. I apologize for interrupting.
Just two more lines I have within CCD. So in anticipation of hopefully moving forward with a new street sweeper, I've added a budgeted line in there. I've never been through a street sweeper purchase, but according to Mr. Kubiak, they are quite expensive. So
I saw them guys before. They pushed brooms.
It's probably about 150,000.
But there's overtime
More than that.
involved.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you'll see public safety vehicles. I have bumped up to a budgeted line of 100,000 that is in anticipation. That is in anticipation of the ambulance lease once we get that all taken care of here soon. And also that is in anticipation of getting some new public safety vehicles, maybe a couple of Durangos, a couple more Rams. We've had discussion with fire department about the need for a new chaser vehicle. There's the potential for some grants, but those are reimbursable and nothing is 100% set in stone. So we'll see.
The street sweeper, the first one I got with lottery grant, and it cost about $125,000. I think the second one we got cost about $185,000.
They are expensive.
Yeah, wow. Hey, Bob, now that we know that you're still with us, I got a call from Jerry Sweats at St. John. St.
Right.
John, working with Lake County and working with NERC on putting together a large-scale Klein Avenue project. Part of it would
Correct.
Lake County, part of it would be St. John. And Jerry asked if we would be interested in getting in that discussion of what the thought is to make Klein Avenue go all the way through
That cornfield.
that cornfield.
That makes sense.
But then to also make it 3 lanes, basically from US 30 all the way to Cedar Lake. And so, since you're on the street committee, Bob, I think it would be great if you would be a part of that conversation.
All right, I'll do that.
Good, thank you.
Good.
Because I think it's worthwhile if we got partnering agencies to at least kick the tires on it and see what opportunity there might be to.
I talked to Tippy about that. He said, it's a swamp, it's a wetland. I go, Jerry, it's needed.
But the county's working with St. John. They're going to be going to NERC here in the next few weeks to start this process. So if I give you Jerry's phone number, Bob, would you give him a call?
I have it.
Okay. Yeah, so give him a buzz, get that conversation going, and maybe get the street committee together for a meeting once you get some information from Jerry on what steps we need to take to be a part of that conversation.
All right,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, anybody else? Anything else?
Jen, just an idea. Northwest IUN has a School of Public Administration. I would reach out to their employment department and ask them to post your job opening, because then you have young minds that are studying this industry that you could hire part-time. That's what I would only be doing. I would hire people that want to be in this industry.
That's how Mr. Griffin gets many of
Perfect.
his
'Cause that's-
employees.
It's okay to copy Mike Griffin. He's done it pretty well.
Yeah, especially 800 Gs a year.
He's the
contract.
clerk treasurer of Highland.
He's like a god around here.
Yeah, he's
If you want to hire a carpenter,
pretty
you go to
amazing.
the carpenters.
Anybody else? Anything else? Is there any public comment online or?
See nobody on there. It looks like 0.
No, it's 0 then.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was on.
0,
Yeah,
okay.
nobody.
Okay, second call for public comment. Anybody in the audience?
Me, I have one. And